What happens when being good isn't enough anymore? Okay. Stop what you're doing right now. I need you to think back to a moment, maybe it was in a theater, maybe it was on your couch with a bowl of popcorn the size of your head, when an animated movie completely blindsided you. When you walked in expecting something cute and colorful for the kids, and what you got instead was sharp, fast, stylish, and so cleverly written that you found yourself leaning forward in your seat like this was some kind of Ocean's 11 heist thriller wrapped in the skin of a cartoon. That's what the first Bad Guys did back in 2022. And if you were there for it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But here's the thing that's been haunting me ever since the credits rolled on that sequel, and yes, we are absolutely talking about the Bad Guys 2 today, every single inch of it. The question that this movie dares to ask is bigger, messier, and way more emotionally complicated than anything the first film attempted. Because the first movie asked, can bad guys go good? The sequel flips that on its head entirely. It asks, what happens when going good isn't enough to save you? What happens when the system you trusted, the identity you rebuilt from the ground up, the relationships you fought tooth and nail to preserve, what happens when all of that gets stripped away, and the only tools you have left are the ones you swore you'd never use again? That's the beating heart of the Bad Guys 2. And I'm telling you right now, whether you're a fan of the original, whether you've got kids who've watched it 17 times on streaming, or whether you're just somebody who respects great animated filmmaking, this review is going to take you through every single frame of this movie. The story, the characters, the themes, the animation, the music, the jaw-dropping twists, all of it. We are going deep today. So settle in. Get comfortable. Because we've got a long, beautiful, absolutely wild ride ahead of us. And trust me when I say this, by the time we're done here, you're either going to want to watch this movie for the first time, or watch it all over again with completely fresh eyes. Let's go. Section 2, Movie Overview. Setting the stage, who made this, who's in it, and why it matters. Let's lay the foundation first, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why the Bad Guys 2 landed the way it did. The original Bad Guys, released by DreamWorks Animation and distributed by Universal Pictures in April of 2022, was something of a pleasant surprise for audiences and critics alike. Based on the graphic novel series by Aaron Blabey, that first movie took a crew of anthropomorphic criminal animals, a wolf, a shark, a piranha, a tarantula, and a snake, and put them through this stylish, funny, emotionally resonant story about redemption, identity, and what it means to choose who you want to be. It made over $250 million at the worldwide box office on a relatively modest budget. It earned a Rotten Tomatoes score that placed it comfortably among DreamWorks' better modern offerings. And more importantly, it built a fanbase. A real, passionate, invested fanbase of kids who loved the heist energy and adults who appreciated the Tarantino-influenced visual style, the pop culture savvy, and the surprisingly tender emotional core underneath all that cool. Directed by Pierre Perifel, a DreamWorks veteran whose sensibilities were clearly shaped by classic crime cinema and anime, the first film was a genuine creative statement. It had a voice and a vision. And when the sequel was announced, the question on everybody's mind was simple: can they do it again? Can they recapture the magic? Or is this going to be one of those sequels that dilutes everything that made the original special just to chase the box office? I'm going to answer that question thoroughly throughout this video, but let me just say up front, The Bad Guys 2 does not play it safe. And that alone is worth celebrating. Pierre Perifel returns to the director's chair for the sequel, which is significant. When the same creative mind comes back for round 2, you get continuity of vision. You don't get the tonal whiplash that can happen when a studio hands off a beloved property to a different team who doesn't fully understand what made it work in the first place. Perifel clearly had more he wanted to say with these characters, and it shows in every scene. The voice cast returns in full force. Sam Rockwell is back as Mr. Wolf, and if you ask me, this might be the most important voice performance in the entire movie. There's a different kind of weight to Wolf in this sequel, a weariness, a vulnerability, and Rockwell plays it with this beautifully understated quality that makes you forget you're listening to a cartoon wolf. He sounds like a man who's genuinely tired and genuinely afraid, and that's not easy to pull off in an animated feature. Marc Maron is back as Mr. Snake, and the dynamic between Snake and Wolf is something we're going to spend a lot of time on today because it is absolutely central to the emotional machinery of this film. Awkwafina returns as Ms. Tarantula, Webs, and she gets more to do here in terms of the actual plot mechanics, which is fantastic because her voice work in the first film was a highlight that deserved more screen time. Craig Robinson is back as Mr. Shuck, Anthony Ramos returns as Mr. Piranha, and Zazie Beetz is back as Diane Foxington, the governor, whose role in this sequel takes on some genuinely fascinating new dimensions. The new additions to the cast deserve special mention, and we'll get there when we get to them in the story breakdown. But suffice it to say, the filmmakers made smart choices about who to bring into this world, and those new characters don't feel like sequel bait additions. They feel earned. Culturally, The Bad Guys 2 arrives in a landscape where animated films have been fighting for their prestige back. The pandemic-era streaming pivot led to a stretch where it felt like major animation studios were either playing it safe with sequels and remakes, or making genuinely bold swings that didn't always land commercially. The Bad Guys 2 walks a fascinating middle line. It's a sequel to an established property, yes, but it takes risks with its story and its themes that most studios wouldn't greenlight. The fact that it exists in the form it does is itself something of a minor miracle of creative ambition. Audience expectations walking in were interesting. Fans of the first film wanted more of the same cool, more heists, more banter, more of that kinetic anime-influenced animation style. But they also wanted growth. Nobody wanted a retread, and the marketing for this film was careful to signal that while the gang was back, the circumstances were radically different. The tone shifted. The stakes got raised. And the emotional territory got a lot more complicated. So was it worth the wait? Let's find out together. Section 3, the full story breakdown. Scene by scene, beat by beat, every major moment examined. Act 1, the price of good. The movie opens not with chaos, not with a heist, not with that electric jazz-infused energy that kicked off the first film. Instead, it opens quietly. And that quietness is deliberate. It's the first signal that this film is operating on a different frequency. We're given a montage, beautifully rendered, almost melancholy in its pacing, of the bad guys living their new lives as reformed citizens. And it's been a few months now since the events of the first film. The gang is genuinely trying. They're out in the world. They're doing community service, attending rehabilitation programs, working legitimate jobs, and attempting to integrate into a society that, frankly, has never wanted them there. Mr. Wolf is working at a youth center, mentoring at-risk kids, of all things. And the irony is rich but never played for cheap laughs. Wolf is good at it. He connects with these kids. He understands them in a way that the volunteers who grew up comfortable and easy can apostrophe T. Because Wolf was one of these kids. In a sense. He knows what it's like to feel like the world already decided what you are before you got a chance to decide for yourself. But there's a price. And the movie wastes no time making that price visible. Every time Wolf walks into a store, people clutch their bags. Every time the gang rides public transit, other passengers shift in their seats and exchange worried glances. There are news segments running in the background of scenes, visible on television screens, in restaurant windows and waiting rooms, where pundits debate whether the bad guys' reformation is genuine or just a sophisticated long con. Whether these animals can really change, or whether society is being naive to trust them. It's pointed social commentary, delivered with a light enough touch that it doesn't feel like a lecture. But it's there. And it bites. The gang gathers for what's become a weekly ritual, dinner together at a restaurant that's willing to serve them. The same one every week because it's one of the only ones that doesn't find an excuse to turn them away, and there's an unspoken agreement around the table that nobody's going to complain. Nobody's going to admit how hard it is. Because they're the bad guys. They don't do vulnerable. Except Wolf. Wolf almost does vulnerable. There's a moment at that dinner where he catches his reflection in a spoon, this little visual gag that becomes something more, and for just a half second, you see something cross his face. Not doubt, exactly. More like exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who is working tremendously hard to be something the world isn't sure it believes he can be. Sam Rockwell sells it without a word. Just a pause, a breath, and then the grin snaps back into place. Snake, meanwhile, is having a fundamentally different experience. And this is where the movie begins its first really significant thematic divergence from the first film. In The Bad Guys, Snake's arc was about a very private, very guarded kind of loyalty. About the fear of being abandoned. About what happens when a lifetime of being told you're the villain makes you internalize it so deeply that you mistake it for identity. He started as the most resistant to change and ended the film in a place of tentative, fragile acceptance, both of the team's new direction and of his own complicated feelings about it. The Bad Guys 2 picks up that thread and immediately begins to pull it somewhere darker. Snake is struggling in a way that he absolutely cannot and will not articulate, because that's not who Snake is. But the movie shows us rather than tells us. His apartment, we get a glimpse of it in one early scene, is Spartan in a way that goes past minimalism into something that looks more like emptiness. He's not decorating. He's not settling in. He's not making peace with the new life. He's waiting. For what? He doesn't know. That's the problem. The inciting incident of the film comes at the 20-minute mark, and it's a doozy. A new criminal organization has emerged in the city. And not just any criminal organization, a sophisticated, technologically advanced, seemingly untouchable empire operating behind the facade of a legitimate corporate entity. The movie introduces this organization slowly, the way a good thriller introduces its antagonist. In pieces. In glimpses. Through the effects of their actions rather than the actions themselves. We hear about a series of impossible thefts. High-value targets. No witnesses. No evidence. No digital footprint. Perfect execution. The kind of jobs that the bad guys, in their criminal heyday, would have looked at with professional admiration. The governor, Diane Foxington, brings this to Wolf's attention privately, in a scene that crackles with the complicated chemistry between these two characters. Because remember, by the end of the first film, Diane's own history as the Crimson Paw had been revealed. She had her own past as a thief. She understood these guys not from the outside but from the inside, and that shared understanding was the foundation of a fragile, complicated trust. Now she's asking Wolf for help. Not officially. This is off the books. Off the record. The police can't get near this organization because the organization is 3 steps ahead of every conventional investigative approach. But people with a certain kind of expertise, a certain kind of specific criminal knowledge, people who've operated at this level, might be able to see what law enforcement can't. She needs the bad guys to think like bad guys again. And here's where the movie starts its central dramatic tension in earnest. Wolf's immediate, gut-level reaction is yes. Before his brain can catch up, his instincts say yes. And then his brain catches up, and he's horrified by how fast that yes came. Because this is the guy who's been working overtime to unlearn those instincts, to build something new over the old architecture. And the old architecture just responded before he could stop it. He tells Diane he needs to think about it. He goes back to the gang. And the conversation that follows, the one where he explains the situation and asks for their input, is maybe my single favorite scene in the first act of this movie. The table scene. Because each member of the gang responds exactly as their character demands, and it tells you everything about where each of them is in their personal reformation journey. Webbs is immediately analytical. She starts running logistics. Risk assessment. She's not excited exactly, but she's engaged, and you can see the part of her that finds genuine satisfaction in complex problem solving lighting up like a switchboard. Shark's response is the most pure. He's worried. Not about the mission, about what it means. He's worked hard to become someone his community, the community of sharks he grew up embarrassed to be part of, could be proud of. He's worked on his empathy, on his anxiety about being seen, on his tendency to perform for approval. He doesn't want to do anything that could set that back. Piranha's response is Piranha's response, which is to say he's enthusiastic about the prospect of action and slightly unclear on the nuances of the moral question being raised, and he says exactly the wrong thing in exactly the way that somehow still makes you love him. And Snake says nothing. He listens. He watches Wolf's face. And then he gets up, walks to the window, and says one sentence that lands like a stone dropping into still water. Tell me we'd be doing this because it's the right thing, not because part of you missed it. The silence that follows is enormous. Wolf can't answer right away. And that inability to immediately answer is itself the answer. Snake turns around, and there's something in his expression, something the animators have captured with remarkable nuance, that is equal parts challenge and fear. Because he knows Wolf better than anyone. Better than Wolf knows himself in some respects. And Snake is terrified. Not of the mission. Of what the mission reveals. That old selves have a gravitational pull that never fully goes away. That they'd only been orbiting redemption, and the orbit was still very close to where they'd started. Act 1 continued, the new players. Before the gang commits to anything, the movie expands its world in ways that feel organic and necessary rather than sequel stuffed. We're introduced to the primary antagonist of the bad guys too, and I'm going to take some time with this character because they represent one of the most conceptually interesting villain choices in recent animated film history. The antagonist, a chameleon named Vex, voiced with silky menace by a performer who disappears completely into the role, is revealed gradually. We see Vex in pieces before we see Vex whole. A gloved hand. A silhouette behind frosted glass. The effect of Vex's presence on rooms full of capable, dangerous people, the way they go quiet, the way they straighten up, the way they choose their words with unusual care. Vex is terrifying not because of physical menace but because of a quality that's far harder to animate and far more unsettling to watch. Vex is unreadable. As a chameleon, both literally and figuratively, Vex changes to match whatever environment requires. In a boardroom, Vex is the picture of corporate legitimacy, all polished diction and reasonable sounding positions. In the criminal underworld, Vex commands through a barely contained volatility that everyone in the room can feel like a change in air pressure. With subordinates, Vex is charming, almost paternal, interested, attentive, seemingly warm. And then someone faints, and you see the mask slip for just a fraction of a second, and what's underneath is ice. The literal visual of a chameleon changing colors is used throughout the film as both character expression and metaphor, and the animation team does extraordinary work with it. When Vex is in control and comfortable, the colors are muted, cool, professional. When Vex is angry, genuinely angry, the colors shift to something violent, hot reds bleeding through the corporate gray like a wound, before the control snaps back and the surface smooths again. It's a villain design that works on multiple levels simultaneously, and that's rare. The new heroic addition to the cast is equally interesting, a young street kid named Fen, a fennec fox with enormous ears and the kind of adaptive survival intelligence that comes from having absolutely no safety net for as long as you can remember. Fen has been surviving on the edges of Vex's operation, not employed, not affiliated, just adjacent. Watching. Learning. Occasionally lifting things when the opportunity presented itself. Fen stumbles into the bad guy's orbit almost accidentally, and what follows is a dynamic that gives the movie its most emotionally resonant new relationship, between Fen and Wolf. Because Wolf sees himself in this kid. Sees the same hunger, the same defensive humor, the same practiced performance of toughness that is itself a form of armor. And it immediately changes the personal stakes of the mission in a way that gives Wolf's character arc its most urgent texture. This isn't just about proving something to Diane, or proving something to the world. Now Wolf is also asking himself what kind of example he sets for someone who's watching him decide who he's going to be. Act 2, Going Back In. The gang agrees to the mission, with conditions. They will use their criminal skills to investigate Vex's operation and gather intelligence that can be used to dismantle it from the outside. They are not doing heists. They are not committing crimes. They are operating as assets for the governor's office in a strictly advisory capacity. These conditions last approximately 45 minutes of screen time before the movie starts dismantling them one by one, and the way it does so is some of the best plotting in the film. The first complication comes from the investigation itself. The intelligence gathering requires the gang to go deeper into Vex's world than they anticipated. Because Vex, being a chameleon, being fundamentally an entity of disguise and infiltration, has built an organization that is itself a series of nested identities. Every layer of protection you strip away reveals another layer underneath. Every piece of intelligence points to another piece of intelligence that you can't get without getting closer. Webbs, who is running the technical operation from a secure location, identifies a critical data node, a server holding the financial architecture of Vex's entire operation, that could be the key to everything. But the server is inside a secured facility that uses a biometric access system the gang's tech can't crack remotely. You have to go in physically. There's a scene here, the planning sequence for this infiltration, that is an absolute love letter to the heist genre. The whiteboard diagrams, the role assignments, the walkthrough rehearsal that goes perfectly and therefore guarantees something will go spectacularly wrong during the actual job. It's funny, intense and technically brilliant in the way it uses the animation medium to compress and expand time for comic and dramatic effect. Wolf is in his element here, and that's the problem. Because you can see how alive he becomes. Not happy exactly, it's not simple enough to be happiness, but lit up. Operating at a level of creative intensity and decisive leadership that he simply hasn't been able to find in the legitimate world. And the camera notices. The film notices. There are these subtle, slightly uncomfortable close-ups on Wolf's face during the planning sequence where the joy on his features is genuine and unguarded, and it sits right next to the awareness that this joy is complicated. Rockwell's voice work during these scenes is outstanding. There's an undercurrent of something that sounds like relief, the relief of someone who's been holding their breath for months and finally, just for a moment, is able to exhale, and it's heartbreaking because you understand it completely even as you understand the danger it represents. Snake, watching Wolf during the planning sequence, has an expression that we keep coming back to. It's the look of someone who loves a person and is frightened for them at the same time. It's the look of someone who understands a weakness because he shares it, and is therefore powerless to pretend it isn't there. The break-in sequence. The actual infiltration of Vex's secured facility is the first major action set piece of the film, and cinematically it's a masterclass. The sequence is structured in 3 distinct movements, each with its own visual and tonal register, and the transitions between them are handled with the kind of confident editorial rhythm that tells you the filmmakers have complete command of the material. The first movement is pure comic timing, the getting in phase, where every element of the plan that could go slightly sideways goes slightly sideways in ways that are just chaotic enough to be funny but not so catastrophic that they can't be managed. Shark's portion of the infiltration involves an elaborate disguise that keeps almost being blown by the sheer force of Shark's ongoing anxiety about social interaction. Piranha's role requires him to stay absolutely still and absolutely quiet for an extended period of time, which is basically asking gravity to flow upward. Webbs is in their ear the whole time, providing real-time guidance through a comms system while simultaneously monitoring approximately 9 different feeds and variables. The second movement is pure tension, the getting to the target phase, where the comedy drains away and what replaces it is a genuinely suspenseful stealth sequence that wouldn't feel out of place in a live-action thriller. The color palette shifts. The music drops to a spare, percussive heartbeat. The camera gets slower and closer. And Wolf navigates the final approach to the server room with a focused, economical elegance that reminds you why this character is compelling beyond the jokes and the charm. The third movement is where the movie drops its first major plot bomb. Wolf gets to the server. He accesses it. And what he finds there isn't just evidence against Vex's operation. What he finds there is evidence that Vex's operation has been watching them. The bad guys. By name. With files. With surveillance photos. With detailed psychological profiles of each gang member that are disturbing in their accuracy. And then he finds one more thing. A file with a name on it that stops his blood cold. The name is Diane Foxington's. And Diane's file isn't in the section for people Vex is targeting as enemies. It's in the section for people Vex has existing relationships with. The betrayal question. This is the moment where the bad guys 2 earns its stripes as a genuinely sophisticated piece of storytelling. Because it would have been easy, and actually much less interesting, to make Diane a straightforward villain. To reveal that she's been playing the gang from the start, using them as pawns in some scheme that'll be revealed in the 3rd act. Instead, the movie does something much more complicated. Because Diane's file in Vex's system doesn't prove she's working for Vex. What it proves is that she and Vex have history. That their connection predates her time as governor. That there is something between them that she has never disclosed. And that ambiguity, is she compromised? Is she being played? Is she complicit? Is she a victim of her own past? Is what drives the next 30 minutes of the film with a kind of cold sweat anxiety that very few animated movies ever generate. Wolf doesn't tell the rest of the gang immediately. He extracts the data, gets out of the facility, and sits with what he knows in the awful quiet of his own skull. Snake notices. Of course Snake notices. Because there are no secrets between these two, not really, there's just the time it takes for one of them to stop pretending. They have a conversation in the car on the way back to the safe house that I want to spend some real time on, because it might be the best written dialogue scene in the entire film. Snake, who is driving, doesn't look at Wolf when he asks what happened in there. Wolf, who is staring at the window, doesn't look at Snake when he says nothing happened. Snake lets the silence sit for exactly the right amount of time, long enough that they both know Wolf is lying, short enough that Wolf doesn't have to say so out loud, and then Snake says, "You know the difference between us and them? We never lied to each other. Not once in 30 years. We kept every other lie in the world going, but not that one." And Wolf turns away from the window and looks at Snake. And tells him. What follows is Snake's longest unguarded moment in either film. The mask doesn't drop slowly, it doesn't drift, it just goes. Suddenly Snake looks exhausted and afraid and heartbroken in a way that Marc Maron communicates through voice alone, through nothing but the quality of his breathing and the flatness that comes into his delivery, and it is a quietly devastating performance. Because for Snake, the revelation about Diane isn't just a plot complication, it's an existential threat to the entire structure of his changed life. Because the change was built on trust. On the belief, fragile, hard-won, still new, that choosing good meant being on the side of people who would be straight with you. And if the person who led them across that threshold wasn't straight with them, then what does any of it mean? What does the choice cost if it was made on incomplete information? Act 2 continued. Vex makes a move. While the gang is processing this, Vex makes a move that changes the entire shape of the story. It turns out the gang didn't infiltrate Vex's server undetected. They thought they did. Webbs was certain they left no trace, but Vex's operation has a level of counterintelligence sophistication that went beyond what even Webbs anticipated. A counter that reset perfectly once they were out, giving them the illusion of a clean exit while actually marking them. Vex knows who was in the facility. And rather than being threatened by it, Vex is intrigued. This is where the movie reveals the dimension of Vex's plan that elevates the antagonist from memorable villain to genuinely complex nemesis. Vex doesn't want to destroy the bad guys. Vex wants to recruit them. And the recruitment pitch, delivered through a series of increasingly sophisticated and targeted moves, is built around one core argument that is uncomfortable precisely because it has genuine truth in it. The world will never fully accept you. You know this. You've known this since the moment you started trying. The doors that close, the stairs that follow, the news segments that still run the reformed criminal animals angle every time something goes wrong anywhere in the city. The good cannot offer you a place in its structure that isn't qualified and conditional and revocable at any moment. But I can offer you a structure where what you are is an asset rather than a liability. Where your specific skills are valued rather than tolerated. It's the seduction of belonging. And it's aimed at the cracks in each gang member with surgical precision. Because Vex's psychological profiles were accurate. Vex understands each of them. And Vex knows exactly where to push. Fenn's story deepens. The Fen subplot, which has been running parallel to the main narrative, takes a turn here that I genuinely did not see coming. It's revealed that Fen wasn't just randomly surviving on the edges of Vex's operation. Fen was placed there. Not by Diane. The movie is careful not to make that connection, which would be too convenient, but by someone else from Fen's past. An older figure, now absent, who wanted someone they trusted keeping eyes on Vex's movements from a position Vex wouldn't bother monitoring, because no serious player monitors a kid. This backstory reframes everything we've seen from Fen up to this point. All that apparent improvisation was actually informed by a deeper mission context. Fen has been gathering intelligence for longer than the bad guys have been on a case. And some of what Fen knows fills in the gaps of what Wolf found on that server. Including, critically, the nature of Vex and Diane's shared history. The scene where Fen tells Wolf what they know, in a quiet corner of the youth center where Wolf still shows up to mentor even in the middle of all this, because he refuses to let those kids down, is the emotional midpoint of the film. And it's handled with a restraint that makes it land harder than it would have if the movie went big and dramatic with it. Diane and Vex grew up together, in a sense. Not literally, their backgrounds are very different. But they operated in the same criminal ecosystem for years, before Diane's own reformation, and they built something between them that went beyond professional. Not romantic. The movie doesn't go there. Something more like an alliance of survivors. A mutual recognition between two people who understood each other's particular brand of self-sufficiency and self-invention. When Diane began to move toward legitimacy, Vex didn't follow. Vex thought the whole enterprise was either naive or a longer con than Vex could see the endgame of. And they parted. Not in violence. Not in betrayal. Just in the quiet, sad way that people part when their paths diverge and they can't find the words for how much it costs. Vex has been watching Diane ever since. Not with malice, initially. With something that might almost be called longing, for the kind of connection they had. The understanding they shared. And then Vex started building the empire. And Diane kept building her legitimate career. And the distance between them became the distance between two different ideas of what power is and what it's for. Now Vex wants Diane back. Not as an ally exactly. More as a mirror. A proof of concept. If Diane can be brought back into Vex's world, if her reformation can be revealed as reversible, then it proves something Vex needs to believe, that people like them don't really change. They just upgrade their disguises. The gang fractures.
Let's see them handle
the
this
mid-second
traffic.
act break is the gang's fracture point, and it's handled with tremendous emotional intelligence. Because it doesn't happen in a dramatic confrontation. It happens gradually. It happens in the way that real ruptures happen, through accumulating pressure, through small moments of failure to communicate, through each individual carrying their private version of the collective weight without sharing it. Shark is the first to crack, and in a way that's completely true to the character. He has a panic spiral in the middle of a public space, his ongoing social anxiety catching up with him at the worst possible moment, and it draws exactly the kind of attention he's been trying not to draw. It becomes a news item. Small, but real. And the news item frames it in the worst possible way. Reformed criminal shark incident in city center. The word incident doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Shark retreats into himself in a way that breaks your heart, because we've seen how hard he's worked. We've seen the genuine vulnerability underneath all those layers of performed confidence. And now he's in his apartment, watching the news segment on loop, and the loop is doing what loops do. It's convincing him that this is who he is, that this is how the world sees him, that the work doesn't matter because the category is permanent. Piranha, in trying to help Shark, makes it worse in the specific way that Piranha makes things worse, with enthusiasm and imprecision and a heart so good it can't navigate the delicate emotional territory without causing further damage. And then Piranha feels terrible about causing further damage, and the whole thing becomes this cascading pile of good intentions generating bad outcomes that would be funny if it weren't so painfully recognizable. Webbs disappears into the data. She processes stress by working, and right now she has more to work on than she can realistically handle, so she works all of it simultaneously, and the result is a kind of controlled frenzy that her body is starting to object to. There's a scene where we see her just for a moment from outside her workspace, through a window, and she's surrounded by screens and she's moving between them with this hyperkinetic focus that looks impressive from the outside and looks, from her perspective inside of it, like the only way she can keep the panic at bay. And Wolf has gone to see Diane. The confrontation with Diane. This scene is the movie's dramatic centerpiece, the fulcrum on which everything balances, and it is extraordinarily well constructed. Wolf goes to Diane's office. It's late. He shouldn't be there. She didn't ask for this meeting and it breaks the careful operational distance they've been maintaining. But Wolf is not capable of carrying what he knows any further without putting it down somewhere, and Diane is the only place it can go. He doesn't lead with accusation. He leads with what is clearly, observably, the truth of where he stands. I vouched for you to them. Every time Snake's eyes asked me if we were trusting the right person, I met those eyes and I said yes. So if there's something I'm not seeing clearly, I need you to help me see it. Because right now what I see doesn't look like what I was told. And Diane, here is where Zazie Beetz does her finest work in this film. Diane doesn't get defensive. She doesn't reach for justification. She does something much more difficult and much more interesting. She gets still. She goes very quiet and very still in a way that tells you this is someone who knows exactly what moment they're in. Who has known, probably for some time, that this moment was coming. Who is facing it not with surprise but with something closer to resigned recognition. And then she tells him everything. The history with Vex. The gap in what she disclosed. Why she didn't tell them. Not because she didn't trust them, and this is the crucial, devastating distinction, but because she didn't trust herself. Because she wasn't sure that her own read on the situation was clean. Because when you have history with someone like Vex, you can't always tell where your objectivity ends and your complicated feelings begin, and she was afraid that if she told Wolf about the connection, he'd have to make a judgment call about her reliability that she didn't know how to ask him to make fairly. She protected the mission. She told herself she was protecting the mission. But underneath that, she was protecting herself from having to be seen clearly by people who were starting to see her. Wolf sits with this for a long time. The animation of his face during this pause is some of the most subtle, nuanced work in the film, the micro-expressions cycling through something that is recognition, and hurt, and understanding, and the particular sadness of finding that someone's flaw is a flaw you understand because it's your own. He doesn't forgive her easily. But he doesn't walk away. And what he says before he leaves is, next time you're protecting the mission, don't protect it from us. Act 3, the final score. The third act begins with the gang reassembling after the fracture. Not because all the emotional wounds are healed, they're not, but because there's no time left for healing to happen in a neat sequence. The mission has a deadline. Vex is making a move. And they are the only ones in a position to stop it. The plan that Webbs puts together for the final confrontation is the most ambitious thing the bad guys have ever attempted, and that's saying something. It requires operating on multiple fronts simultaneously. It requires using their criminal skills not to commit crime but to counter crime, to think the way Vex thinks, to anticipate the moves of someone who thinks like them, to use the very expertise they've been trying to leave behind as the instrument of protecting what they're trying to build. And here's the beautiful irony at the center of the final act: the skills that made them bad guys are the skills that make them uniquely capable of being the good guys. Not despite who they are. Because of who they are. The identity they've been trying to shed turns out to be the thing that saves the day. But in a different context. In service of different values. The Bad Guys 2 is making an argument about redemption that is more sophisticated than the first film ''s. The first film said, you can choose to be good. The second film says, choosing to be good doesn't mean erasing who you were. It means choosing how you direct what you are. The final sequence plays out across 3 locations simultaneously, a feat of cross-cutting that the editing team handles with tremendous skill, maintaining clarity across complex action while keeping the emotional threads of each character's journey running clearly through the chaos. Wolf and Fen face Vex directly, and the confrontation is everything you'd want from a finale that's been built to this point. It's tense and fast and unexpectedly emotional, because Vex, in a final move that is either brilliant or desperate or both, makes the recruitment pitch directly to Wolf. Face to face. With full knowledge of what Wolf has been through, and full contempt for the idea that it was worth the cost. Vex's argument, delivered with that silky, cold certainty you could have had anything. Instead you have marginally better press coverage and a job at a community center. Tell me, was it worth it? And Wolf, and this is the movie's answer to its central question. This is the thesis statement delivered in the voice of a cartoon wolf in the middle of an animated climax, and it shouldn't work as well as it does, but it absolutely, completely works. Wolf doesn't answer with a speech. He answers with a choice. He has the opportunity to take something. To use this moment to secure an advantage that would only benefit the bad guys. And he doesn't take it. Not because it doesn't occur to him, the film makes clear it occurs to him, but because that's not what this is for. That's not why they're here. He makes the harder choice. And that choice costs him. And then the gang shows up. The reunion and the final battle. I'm not going to describe every beat of the final action sequence because some of it genuinely has to be experienced in motion, with the music and the color and the kinetic animation doing what they do. But I want to talk about the emotional texture of it, because that's what sets it apart from your standard animated climax. The final battle between the bad guys and Vex's operation is structured less as a traditional hero defeats villain sequence and more as a demonstration. A proof. Each member of the gang gets a moment that is simultaneously a callback to their individual arc throughout the film and a statement about who they've chosen to be. Shark's moment involves him having to navigate a highly public, highly visible confrontation, exactly the kind of situation his anxiety has been most defeated by throughout the film, and choosing to step into it rather than away from it. Not because the fear is gone. The film is honest about this, the fear is still there, his voice is shaking, his hands are shaking. But he steps in anyway, and that choice, made in full view of the cameras that are now inexplicably present because of course there are cameras, is the proof that character is not the absence of fear. It's the action taken in spite of it. Piranha's moment is more surprising. The movie gives him an emotionally sophisticated beat that his character in the first film might not have been capable of delivering. He has to let something go. An opportunity for retribution against someone who genuinely wronged them earlier in the film. He has to recognize that taking that retribution, even when it's warranted, would compromise something more important. And watching Piranha make that call is genuinely moving in a way that I completely didn't anticipate. Webbs gets the technical climax. Naturally, her moment is about trusting her own intelligence not just as a tool for solving problems but as a guide for navigating situations where there isn't a clean logical answer. Where you have to make a judgment call without complete information and live with the uncertainty. She's been running from that kind of vulnerability all film, hiding in the data, hiding in the solvable, and her moment asks her to step out from behind it. And Snake.
Right on time.
Snake's moment is the one that the whole film has been building to, from that early dinner conversation, from the question he asked Wolf in the kitchen, from everything we've understood about where he is in his relationship with the changed life. Snake has been given an out by Vex, secretly, quietly, in a way the others don't know about. An offer that is precisely calibrated to everything Snake's been too proud to admit he's feeling. A way back to a life that asks less of him. That doesn't require him to constantly work against the grain of everything he's built himself on. And Snake, who started the first film as the most resistant, the most defended, the most comfortable in the old identity, turns it down. Not with a speech. Not with fanfare. Not with any of the performance that might suggest this is about appearances. He turns it down because of Wolf. Because of 30 years of something that doesn't have a clean name but is as real as anything either of them has ever had. And because the movie earns this moment completely, because he's decided. Not tentatively, not conditionally. He's decided. The new life is harder and the new life costs more and the world isn't going to meet them halfway. And none of that changes the decision because the decision was never about what was easy. Marc Maron delivers Snake's final decisive line with a quiet certainty that makes it land like the last note in a piece of music you've been following for 2 hours. It just settles. And it's right. The resolution. Vex is defeated, not destroyed, and this is a meaningful choice that we'll discuss more in the themes section. through a combination of the gang's skills, Fenn's intelligence, and Diane's willingness to finally be fully transparent, fully present, and fully accountable. The aftermath is handled with notable restraint. There's no triumphant parade. No official vindication that makes all the systemic prejudice and skepticism disappear overnight. The news coverage of the bad guy's role in stopping Vex is complicated. Some outlets frame it positively, some are still doing the "is this what it looks like" angle, some are focused on the aspects of the operation that are difficult to explain without revealing things that can't be publicly revealed. The world hasn't changed. The gang is still who they are in the eyes of most people. The work they did doesn't come with a certificate of acceptance. But something has changed. And the movie's final sequence articulates what it is with beautiful economy. The gang is back at their restaurant. Same table. Same ritual. And the scene is superficially identical to the one at the beginning of the film. The same setup, the same characters, the same visual composition. Except everything feels different. The weight is different. There's something easier in the room, not resolved, not concluded, but settled in a way it wasn't before. Like something that was a question has become an answer. Not everyone's question. Their own. The final shot of the film is Wolf looking at his reflection. Not in a spoon this time, in the restaurant window. And the expression on his face doesn't have that flicker of exhaustion and doubt that the early scene carried. He looks like someone who knows where he is. Not where the world wants him to be. Where he is. And then the gang gets noisy and the moment breaks open into warmth and laughter and life, and it's one of the loveliest endings in recent animated film. Section 4, Character and Performance Analysis. The souls behind the snouts, deep character study. Mr. Wolf, Sam Rockwell. Sam Rockwell is an actor whose particular gift has always been this kind of warm, frictionless charisma, the ability to make a character deeply appealing even when, maybe especially when, that character is operating in morally complicated territory. He's made a career of likable anti-heroes, of guys who are doing something questionable but for reasons you understand and maybe even sympathize with. Wolf in The Bad Guys 2 requires something more from him than charm. It requires genuine emotional weight. It requires the kind of performance that makes you feel a character's interior struggle, not through exposition but through the quality of presence, through what the voice communicates even when the words are careful or deflective or maintaining the surface of competence. Rockwell delivers it completely. There's a quality in his voice during the film's quieter scenes that I describe as controlled ache. The sound of a person carrying something heavy and holding it steady through the force of will. But the weight is visible to anyone paying attention. When Wolf laughs in this movie, there's often something just slightly pressed about it, not false, but measured. When he's in full heist mode, the ease in his voice is real but tinged with something complicated. And in the scenes with Fenn, where he's being as honest as the character gets, Rockwell strips away the surface texture entirely and you hear a voice that's just tired and earnest and working hard to be worthy of the trust being placed in it. It's a beautiful piece of voice acting. Understated in a medium that often rewards the opposite. Mr. Snake, Marc Maron. If Rockwell's performance is about bearing weight gracefully, Maron's is about the specific anguish of a character who isn't graceful by nature, who is all sharp edges and strategic deflection, being required to be something softer. Maron has a voice that's perfectly built for Snake's particular brand of sardonic guardedness. The natural flatness, the way he can load a sentence with subtext through tone alone, the sense that there's always something being withheld. But in The Bad Guys 2, Maron gets to use that instrument in ways the first film only hinted at. The scenes where Snake's guard drops, partially or fully, are the most surprising and affecting moments Maron has in either film. The conversation in the car. The moment of decision at the end. These are sequences where you feel the effort it takes this character to be unguarded, and that effort is communicated through the voice with remarkable specificity. Maron plays Snake as someone who has decided, very carefully, very deliberately, not to be moved by things anymore, and whose entire arc in this film is the erosion of that decision. The way his voice changes as the film progresses, almost imperceptible at first, but cumulative, is the sound of a wall coming down brick by brick. The ensemble. The depth of character work in the ensemble is one of the sequel's genuine strengths. Shark's anxiety arc, Webb's relationship with vulnerability, Piranha's unexpected emotional growth, each of these has more dimension than the first film managed, because the first film needed to spend its time establishing who these characters were. The sequel gets to explore who they're becoming. The addition of Fenn as a character who functions essentially as a mirror for Wolf's original self, a young creature with tremendous potential and tremendous defensiveness, navigating a world that's already decided what they are, is one of the sequel's smartest structural choices. Fenn's arc doesn't overwhelm the main narrative, but it deepens it, giving Wolf's choices a moral weight that extends beyond his own redemption into the question of what legacy he's building. Section 5, Themes, Symbolism and Subtext. What the movie is really saying. Identity as performance versus identity as choice. The most persistent theme running through The Bad Guys 2 is the distinction between performing an identity and choosing one. The first film was largely about making the choice, about recognizing that who you are isn't determined by what the world has categorized you as. But the sequel interrogates what happens after the choice is made. Because a choice isn't permanent by its own gravity. It has to be remade, repeatedly, under increasing pressure, as the world continues to present alternative narratives about who you are. The gang is surrounded, throughout this film, by people and systems that persistently offer them back their old identities as though these are gifts, as though bad guy is what they really are underneath, and the reformation is the performance. Vex is the crystallized version of this pressure. Everything about Vex's recruitment strategy is built around the argument that authenticity means returning to what you started as. That change is fundamentally inauthentic. That the self is fixed. The movie's rejection of this argument is its thesis. Identity isn't fixed. But it isn't effortless either. The bad guy's choice to be better is meaningful precisely because it costs something. Precisely because it would be easier not to choose it. The chameleon as metaphor. Vex's species is not accidental. The chameleon in this film represents the nihilism of performed selfhood, the idea that if everything is a mask, then there is no authentic self worth protecting. Vex has changed color so many times, in service of so many contexts, that the concept of a genuine interior has become theoretical. What remains is purely strategic, what color serves the moment. This is presented as a seductive idea and also as a fundamentally tragic one. Vex is enormously capable and completely alone in a way that isn't chosen but imposed by the total absence of any stable self that could be known or trusted by another person. The bad guys, for all their dysfunction and their fractured dynamics and their ongoing navigation of a society that doesn't want them, have each other in a way that is the direct opposite of this. They are knowable to each other. They cannot change color with each other, because the others already know the color. Trust as a counter to systemic prejudice. The movie makes a quietly radical argument about how to survive in a system that is built against you. It doesn't pretend the system can be changed quickly, or that individual virtue will override structural bias. The world at the end of The Bad Guys 2 is still largely the world at the beginning. The news is still complicated, the store clerks still clutch their bags, the pundits are still punting. But the gang survives in it, not just practically, but psychologically, through the web of relationships between them. Through the trust that is, laboriously and imperfectly, maintained and rebuilt. The counter to being unseen by the world is being seen by the people who matter. It's not a perfect solution. But it's a real one. Section 6, Technical and Artistic Review. The craft behind the canvas.
Agreed.
The animation in The Bad Guys 2 is a significant evolution from the first film's already impressive work. The anime-influenced stylization that was the first film's visual signature has been refined and extended. The exaggerated motion lines, the dynamic pose holding, the graphic novel panel compositions, and integrated more seamlessly with character animation that is increasingly nuanced in its expression of interior states. The color design is doing serious narrative work throughout the film. The early scenes of the gang trying to live legitimate lives have a palette that is slightly desaturated, still vibrant, because DreamWorks doesn't do genuinely dull visuals, but subdued relative to what comes later. As the gang goes back into their criminal expertise mode, The color saturates. There's more gold, more deep blue, more of the dual-tone richness that the first film used for its heist sequences. This could read as the film glamorizing the criminal life, and I think it's worth acknowledging that tension directly. The movie is aware of it. The saturation isn't purely celebratory. It's also analytical. This is how Wolf's brain works, this is what his engaged, alive state looks like, and the film wants you to feel the pull of it even as it examines the complications. The music deserves special mention. The score incorporates elements from multiple musical worlds, jazz, hip-hop, electronic, orchestral, in ways that serve the film's tonal flexibility. The transition from the more subdued first act score to the more propulsive heist mode compositions is handled with beautiful editorial precision, and there are moments where the music is essentially doing character work, articulating interior states that the animation chooses to keep on the surface. The voice direction is consistently excellent. Every performer sounds fully inhabited in their character, and the ensemble scenes, the table conversations, the team debriefs, have the overlapping, slightly chaotic energy of actual group dynamics rather than the cleaned-up, take-your-turn quality that animated ensemble scenes often fall into. Section 7, Critical Review and Comparisons. The Honest Assessment. What The Bad Guys 2 gets right. Almost everything it attempts, it does with genuine craft and intention. The story is more complex than the first film without being confusing. The emotional stakes are higher without being manipulative. The new characters earn their place without crowding out the originals. The themes are substantive without being preachy. And the entertainment value, the sheer moment-to-moment pleasure of watching these characters in motion, is as high or higher than the original. The sequel avoids the two most common pitfalls of animated sequels. It doesn't just repeat the first film's beats in slightly different costumes, and it doesn't abandon what made the first film work in pursuit of something more serious or prestige. It genuinely extends and deepens the story, where it occasionally stumbles. The mid-second act pacing is the film's weakest point. The gang fracture sequence, while emotionally necessary, takes slightly longer than the story requires, and there's a stretch of about 15 minutes where the forward momentum stalls in a way that the first film, with its tighter runtime and less ambitious emotional agenda, didn't risk. The Fen backstory reveal could have been integrated more organically. The exposition surrounding Fen's history arrives in a section of the film that already has a lot going on, and while the information is important, the delivery feels slightly expedient, like the writers knew what they needed to communicate but hadn't quite found the most graceful way to get it in. And while Vex is an excellent villain concept executed with considerable skill, the character benefits from slightly more screen time to fully develop the emotional dimension that the script suggests is there. We're told more than we're shown about what drives Vex at the deepest level, and the film would have been stronger for more direct engagement with that interior. Comparisons. In the landscape of animated heist-adjacent films with redemption themes, The Bad Guys 2 sits comfortably at the top tier. It compares favorably to the best of the Spider-Verse films in terms of visual ambition and thematic sophistication, different styles, different tones, but similar commitment to using the animation medium to do something genuinely expressive rather than merely functional. The ensemble dynamic and the interplay between style and sincerity invites comparison to the Guardians of the Galaxy films, a crew of misfit outsiders navigating the tension between their histories and their chosen family. The Bad Guys 2 is doing something similar but in a more compressed canvas and with more genuine emotional risk. Section 8, Final Verdict and Rating. What it all means and who this film is for. So here we are. 2 hours deep into this movie and this review, and the question that remains is the same one Wolf asked himself in that restaurant at the beginning of the film, watching his reflection in a spoon. Is this who I am? Is this who I am becoming? And is it worth the cost? The Bad Guys 2 doesn't give easy answers to those questions. And that's exactly why it works as well as it does. It's an animated film for children that is genuinely, unpatronizingly interested in questions that adults spend their whole lives working through. Questions about identity and belonging and the price of growth and the specific courage required to keep choosing the harder thing when the easier thing is right there, visible, available, and familiar. It's also incredibly fun. Let me not bury that lead in all this thematic analysis. This is a movie that delivers on its promise as an entertainment. The jokes land. The action sequences sing. The ensemble chemistry is warm and lived in and genuinely funny. The animation is gorgeous. The voice performances are outstanding across the board. But it's the emotional depth that makes it something worth thinking about after the credits roll. And that depth is hard-won, built through character work and thematic consistency and a willingness to sit with discomfort rather than resolve it prematurely. The Bad Guys 2 is not a perfect film. The pacing stumbles. Some of the connective tissue in the second act is doing double time. The villain, while excellent, wants a little more space. These are real criticisms worth acknowledging. But they're the criticisms of a film that reached for something significant and grabbed most of it. Which is infinitely more interesting than a film that aimed low and hit cleanly. Who is this film for? It's for the kids who loved the first one and are ready for something a little more complicated. It's for the adults who fell for the first film's style and sincerity and were hoping the sequel could match the M. It's for anyone who's ever been told, by circumstance or by society or by their own internalized voice, that they are a fixed thing, a category, a foregone conclusion, and has decided to argue with that. It's for the people who know that choosing better is not a one-time event. That it's a repeated choice, made under pressure, made at cost, made without the guarantee of recognition. It's for everyone who's ever been a bad guy trying to figure out what else they could be. My final rating, 8.5 out of 10. It's genuinely great animated cinema. It pushes the form. It trusts its audience. It delivers entertainment and emotional resonance in equal measure. And it does something that the very best sequels manage to do. It makes you love the original more because of what it adds to it. The Bad Guys started a conversation. The Bad Guys 2 deepens it, complicates it, and then leaves space for a third film that, if the creative team continues to operate at this level, could be something genuinely extraordinary. The gang's not done. And I, for one, cannot wait to see where they go next. Thanks for watching, guys. If this review hit different for you, if it made you think about this film in ways you hadn't before, drop that like button and let me know in the comments, what was your favorite moment? What hit hardest? What are you hoping they tackle in a third film if they make one? I'll be back next week with another deep dive. Until then, stay curious, stay critical, and keep watching great cinema. See you next time.